The judge dismissed Marcus Harlow, a renowned professor known for his works on racial bias, shattering a case that put a young black man's freedom at risk. Marcus and attorney Sophia Grant launched a fight that threatened the judge's career and rocked the judicial system, with Marcus's next move leaving everyone stunned. In the bustling city of Ravensburg, where historic courthouses with towering columns and grand windows loomed over the square, this case became the focal point of discussion. The courtroom, spacious and solemn, was packed to capacity. The wooden benches, polished smooth by generations of witnesses, were now occupied by journalists, activists, and curious townspeople. Overhead, the lights cast a bright glow that bounced off the marble walls, adding to the tension in the room. Marcus Harlow sat calmly among the crowd, his tall figure and crisp suit standing out among the shifting spectators. His gray hair and keen eyes spoke of years of work and trials faced. The courtroom fell silent as James Porter's defender, Sophia Grant, rose to call him to the stand. Sophia, slender and dynamic, adjusted her beige blazer with confident movements and shot a resolute glance at the judge. Known for her sharp mind and unwavering spirit, she commanded respect even from the most skeptical peers. Judge Reed Whittaker, a burly man in his 60s with neatly cropped gray hair and a cold, piercing gaze, raised an eyebrow skeptically as he saw Marcus rise. His perfectly fitted judicial robe emphasized his imposing posture. Whittaker, notorious for his harsh rulings and blunt remarks, looked at the professor with open disdain, appearing resolute and seeing only another interruption to what he considered an important case. "I don't need lectures on social theories in my courtroom," he declared, his voice ringing sharp and dry, like the clash of a sword. A murmur swept through the room. Journalists in the front row whispered amongst themselves, exchanging intrigued looks. Some townspeople raised their eyebrows in disbelief, while others muttered angrily under their breath. The atmosphere crackled with tension. Sophia Grant, unused to such demeaning refusals, stepped forward, ready to object. "Judge Whittaker, this witness." But before she could finish, the judge raised his hand abruptly and struck his gavel, the sound reverberating through the hall. "This is my court," he cut her off, his gaze piercing and leaving no doubt as to his resolve. "Next witness." Marcus, as he stood, gave Sophia a brief nod, silently conveying that this was far from over. Outside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. On the steps of the historic building, journalists with notepads and microphones buzzed with excitement. Some delivered breaking reports for local news, while others debated the motives behind the judge's audacious behavior. "Did you hear? He refused to hear Professor Harlow, a scholar whose works are studied at top universities in the country," reporters whispered amongst themselves. Spectators exiting the courtroom shared their impressions, their conversations merging into an anxious hum. Many were incredulous. How could a judge ignore such an authoritative figure? News of the incident spread rapidly, like wildfire, reaching an ever-widening circle of people. Marcus Harlow left the courtroom with a faint smile. His gaze was calm and focused. Years of teaching and analyzing systemic flaws in the law had taught him not to succumb to emotions in such moments. He knew this humiliation would be the catalyst for something bigger. On his way out, he was stopped by several law students who had attended his seminars. "Professor, how could you let the judge treat you like that?" they asked, barely concealing their indignation. Harlow just shook his head slightly, signaling that this was only the beginning. Meanwhile, James Porter's family was in despair. Crucial evidence that could shed light on James's innocence had been disregarded. Porter's mother, a gray-haired woman with weary eyes, wept as she clutched an old photo of her son. Across the city, people discussed the case in cafes, parks, and on street corners. Online forums and social media were ablaze with outrage. How could they treat Marcus Harlow, a leading expert, so dismissively? Residents wrote. Before long, the case transcended local news. National networks picked up the story, inviting experts to comment on what had happened. Judge Whittaker's reputation took a nosedive. He found himself under intense public scrutiny as his past decisions and methods came under review. Marcus Harlow, armed with firm resolve and deep expertise, was not about to let the injustice stand. Over the next few days, he worked alongside Sophia Grant in her office, cluttered with folders, documents, and laptops with files spread across the desks. Under the soft hum of the lamp, they spent hours debating and compiling a report that would be a powerful strike against the system. The report drew from Marcus's studies, showcasing how bias had influenced countless court outcomes. It meticulously examined cases where disregarding witness testimony led to unjust convictions. The publication of the report sparked widespread discussion. Leading universities across the nation backed Marcus, emphasizing the importance of his research and the validity of his arguments. Law professors, educators, and students began to speak out, supporting Harlow and highlighting that the issue extended beyond a single case. It was systemic. Activist groups and human rights organizations joined the campaign, demanding reforms and noting that Judge Whittaker was merely symptomatic of a deeper problem. Within a week, the Ethics Council, comprising senior judges and legal advisors, summoned Judge Whittaker for a special hearing. This chamber was unlike the familiar courtrooms. Cold marble that echoed with each step, stern faces of the council members, and a silence that pierced like a needle. Marcus Harlow took the stand, his eyes brimming with determination, his voice steady and clear. He spoke not just as a witness, but as an expert demanding justice and change. "This case isn't just about James Porter," Marcus began, sweeping his gaze across the room. "It uncovers entrenched biases that erode trust in the judiciary. And I'm not just speaking about today's incident, but many others that have gone unnoticed." He cited examples, referenced research, and quoted his publications, illustrating how bias could be devastating in court decisions. Judge Whittaker, once unyielding just a week before, now appeared shaken. His expression darkened with each piece of evidence. He was forced to listen as Marcus laid bare the quiet neglect of rights and voices often overlooked under the guise of professionalism. The judge's cold stare lost its former certainty as Marcus connected cases like Porter's into a pattern of systemic prejudice. The chamber was steeped in silence when Marcus concluded. No one remained unmoved. The hearing marked a pivotal moment, validating the need for changes in the judicial system and highlighting the impact of individuals like Marcus Harlow, willing to fight for the truth. The outcome of this landmark case was significant and far-reaching. The Ethics Council ruled that Judge Whittaker would undergo mandatory training on ethics and racial bias. His past cases were to be re-examined for potential errors and biases. This action set a precedent, signaling that the judicial system would no longer tolerate hidden discrimination. James Porter's case also received a new hearing. With Marcus Harlow's full testimony shedding light on systemic issues, the charges against Porter were dropped. As the young man walked out of the courthouse a free man, his eyes shone with relief and gratitude. The crowd outside erupted in applause and cheers. It was a victory not just for Porter, but for everyone fighting for justice. Marcus Harlow became a national symbol, not only of scholarship, but of fearless resistance against injustice. He proved that words and knowledge could be as powerful as any action, and that truth, fortified by evidence, could break down barriers. Public perception shifted sharply. Marcus was hailed as a hero who challenged the system and instigated change. These events served as a catalyst for broad reform. Mandatory racial bias training for judges was instituted nationwide to ensure that decisions were not tainted by prejudice. Past cases with potential discrimination were reviewed to restore justice to those affected. Marcus's previously academic writings became the cornerstone of reforms designed to secure fairness in the judicial system, ensuring that every voice, regardless of race or background, would be heard and considered.